everybody, it's Michelle Jackson. I'm here with this month's Pen Posse Roundtable. And you know how much I love these Pen Posse Roundtables because we all get a chance to talk about a particular topic that is important to us as writers and important to our readers. I am so blessed to have the opportunity to be here with all these amazing writers. These are authors who are publishing books and writing dynamic pieces of work and sharing that information with the world. That's what we're here to do. We are part of the Black Writers Workspace, which is an online community of over 13,000 writers and avid readers. Our goal is to make sure that our work is actually out there and that the community of readers, all readers, get an opportunity to learn about our dynamic stories. So today we're going to talk about writing the Black experience and what readers want. Those are the two topics. We are here live. So you out there, please, you can follow us on or see this on Facebook. You can see this on YouTube, as well as we're going to put clips of it on Instagram and on Twitter. But if you are on Facebook right now and you want to view it from Facebook, go to author-michelle-d-jackson.com, or I'm sorry, author Michelle D. Jackson on Facebook, and you will be able to see the link. We're so excited. You can add your comments and your questions on Facebook, or you can join us on StreamYard, and you can actually put your comments in. We're going to answer those questions as we go. But trust me, the conversation is going to be hot and heavy today because I think this is a topic that we are all very passionate about. So before we have everyone introduce themselves, I want to first introduce myself. I founded the Black Writers Workspace back in 2020. I love every second of it. I moderate the page. So if you are trying to get on the Black Writers Workspace private page, I'm going to see you. I'm going to look at you and make sure that you're the right mix to talk to us about what you're doing when it comes to writing. I am also the owner of PR Solutions LLC, which is a PR firm here in New Orleans, and I am a 3 times published author. So that's who I am. We're going to go around, give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their work, and then we're going to get into our topic, hot and heavy. So we have one more person we're going to add to the screen. There you go. And we ask everyone to mute yourself unless you're speaking. Pronounce your name for me.
Ratia Rogers.
Ratia. So just so everyone know, I don't always know everybody who's on the Pen Posse. That's the fun part about it, okay? These are not my friends who I've convinced to say everything that I want them to say, right? I like to have a good mix of people from all over the country who can bring some insightful information to us about their work and about the whole experience of being published. Most of us, I think everybody's self-published, or anybody who's not self-published. Great. So we are all self-published authors, bloggers, and we're doing a host of different things. But for now, we're going to stop and just give everyone at least 2 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us about their work. And we're going to start with you, Miss Winifred.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Winifred Tata, or Winnie, as I mostly go by. I'm a 4-time self-published author. I write fantasy, sci-fi, and a bit of romance novels. My most recent release was July 1st. It was the 4th book in my fantasy series, The God Scion. I'm a bit younger than most of everyone, but I've been writing probably for about 10 years. And I just started publishing in 2019. And I'm just excited to meet everybody and continue my journey.
We love young writers. You guys, what? You see, she just called us all old, right? I'm just saying, I'm the youngest. I'm here with these dinosaurs. That's all right. That's okay. We're good with that. So it's good to have you here. 4-time published author, so inspiring. I love that we have all these people who are just writing and writing and writing. Congratulations on your work. I can't wait. What's your genre?
So I write fantasy, urban fantasy, contemporary, whichever one you call it. And I also do sci-fi and romance.
Love it. Great. Thank you for being here. Ms. Joyce?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Okay. I'm an armly discharged veteran. I'm disabled. Have degrees in nuclear medicine technology and behavioral psychology. I'm a writer at large for several local newspapers / magazines, and my genre is adult women's fiction. I'm an author, and I have my poetry chapbook coming out this fall called 21 Grams Times 3.
Excellent. Ms. Joyce was with us before. She understands how this pen posse works. 2 hours of conversation about several topics, getting to the heart of these things. We do this because we really want our writers to understand that they're not alone. And some of the questions that they have, some of the concerns that they have, we have had those same things. So we want to share. I started the Black Writers Workspace because there was a point where I published my first book in 2010 and I had no community. I had no one to call. I had no understanding of how to self-publish. It was a really hard thing for me because I love the creative side. I wrote the book, loved it, and then didn't know what to do with it. So that's why we're here, is to make sure that you can get your questions answered. So thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you for your service. And you said you're a military wife too, right?
Yes, girl. It's hard out here.
That's right. Proud Army wife. So I am too, retired Army. Thank you so much for being with us. Pepper?
Good morning, everybody. I am here from Arizona. I lived in LA for 15 years, and I'm originally from the Midwest. So I like saying that because I come from all these places. And I have lived in Europe for 3 years. So during all that time, I've been a writer, and my book is called Harlem's Awakening. It's 1940s fiction. And right now it's published on Spaceboy Books. And I bring that up because originally my book was published in 2013 on Black Hill Press, and they went out of business. And this past year in July, I had to scramble to find another publisher because my book wasn't going to be available. And I say that because that's a part of the journey, getting your book out there, and all of a sudden you don't get your book and your identity is wrapped up, and oh my God. So I write 40s fiction. I write about women empowerment. I write about Black folks. I try to put women in all my stories, or women are in all of my stories. And I also write blogs, and I write for other people, copywriting, ghostwriting, that kind of stuff. So, and I'm a writer, actor sort of person. So I love writing. I love entertainment, and happy to be here.
Anybody with the name Pepper has got to be doing it all. Like that. I love it. I do. I love it. Love it. Love it. So thank you so much for being a part. I think this conversation, I think you're going to bring a lot to the conversation because you're doing so many different things. So thank you so much for being with us. Ratia, I feel like I'm going to mispronounce that. I had already told everybody before. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but is that correct?
That's correct, Ratia.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. Beautiful name. Tell us about yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ratia Rogers, and I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so I began writing. Well, first I must say I've been through a whole lot in life, domestic violence, gang banging, drug selling, fighting, robbing, doing all this stuff. And for a part of time, I was ashamed to talk to the world about it and let people know, what was really up with me. I would tell one or two people, but I wouldn't get up in front of a large capacity of people, in like church buildings or conferences and stuff like that. And so anyway, I came to the point to where I got sick and tired of being like that. And God was dealing with my heart to go ahead and stop holding back the shame of what happened to me and go ahead and write a book. And so, I prayed and all of that and came up with the title, I Broke Out of Prison. So I am Ratia Rogers, the author of I Broke Out of Prison. So this is a bestseller. It has no problem with selling any and everywhere I go. People want it. They buy it all the time at the drop of a hat. It's based off my true life story about the things that I dealt with and all of that. Since then, I've been on the news, newspapers, radios, made an international telling my story on the 700 Club, CBN on TV. And just opened up a lot of doors for me. And so I didn't even know I had it in me. So I am a writer. And ever since then, I have published some more books. One of them is called Light for Children, for the kids. And so I'm in all of it for autobiography books, books that's based on people's true life story, such as myself, and books that are uplifting and inspirational. That's what I'm about. And so I have another book called Prayer Lips, a 31-day devotional journal. And so that was published as well. And then in between time, I've been meeting a lot of different people, and they say, hey, wow, man, I bought your book last month. It's good to run into you again, man. Can you help me write a book? I want to share my story too. And so I've kept getting a lot of that, and a lot of it. So bam, it dawned on me that God wanted me to take a step of faith and reach out there and be the midwife in this season in my life to pull in not just women, but anybody, men, young girls, boys, whatever, whoever has a story, actually a miraculous story. Because some people I talk to, oh, well, I don't have a miraculous story. Yes, you do. You just don't know yet, but you do. And so anyway, I'm saying that to say that I do have a new book coming out where I have collected different miraculous stories of different people to combine in one book. We all know what a collaboration is, an anthology. And so that should be coming out soon. And so I'm a speaker, as you can tell, and all of that, prayer warrior, minister, evangelist. I'm excited. Tomorrow I have my 7th time in a row back to school event right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So just doing good in the hood, doing good in the community, speaking up about what happened. There's no shame in my game. God gets the glory. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Simone?
Yeah, so I am Simone Johnson from Sacramento, California. So it's very early here, but it's okay. So I am I am a senior publishing consultant for a bigger publishing house. I have actually self-published. I had started my first self-publishing journey in 2012. So I've written 5 books since then. Ended up with a 3-book series, post-apocalyptic fiction. So I like speculative fiction, so I have 1 book in the works for that, and then 1 romance book in the works for that. So a little bit of everything. What else can I say? My husband and I, we've been mentoring at-risk youth for over 10 years, and so I do have a project in the future for that. So, Ratia, I echo a lot of what you said because we are very community-driven, working on bringing a writing workshop for young kids that would like to start learning the publishing, how to write a book, and starting very grassroots for kiddos. So that's something that I'm working on right now. We have little ones ourselves, so definitely starting with them. One of our kids has already started writing her books, and so that's where the inspiration came from to kind of put that in motion. So other than that, yeah, I love to connect with different authors like Pepper, ghostwriter. I do proofreading, beta reading, so I have like a little hub of services that I provide as well. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Ashawn?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Compared to the panel, I think I'm the newbie here. I'm a married father of 2. I'm also an Army vet. I have a master's degree in business. My debut novel was published this year, Descent of a Broken Man, back here with some of my writing friends. This is my writing desk I use, and as you can see, I write horror thriller, so they accompany me on my journey when I'm writing. Descent of a Broken Man is the first in a 3-part series. It deals with, I'm a huge mental health advocate. It's hard enough navigating America as a person of color, as an African American. Doing that with any mental health issues, it can be, even more difficult, and sometimes a hurdle some people can't overcome. So I try to, write stories that will encourage people to get the help they need by putting it in more of an entertaining way. And I just choose to do it through horror thriller novels and things of that nature, short stories. I've had a couple of short stories published, and I hope to have the 2nd book published next year.
Well, thank you for being with us, the only guy in the posse, everybody.
Yeah.
So we're loving that. Ariana?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm in Las Vegas, so it's also pretty early here, but I'm excited because this is the best way to start my morning. So with a group of writers, I love it. Love the energy here. I'm actually a teacher. So I teach special education. Been teaching for about 8 years. And I teach at-risk students. As a couple of you guys mentioned, working with the at-risk community, that's like where my heart is. I also have my own private media company so that I actually help people with like their content writing, their business plans, things like that. I mainly aim to help small business owners because, as we know, owning a business, it's a huge cost. So I work hard to make it to where it's accessible for everyone. I also privately tutor at-risk students. And then in my spare time, I'm, of course, with my children. I have 2 younger children. And then I'm also a writer, but I also write on Kindle Vella, which is a series where you can write stories, like small stories over time. So that's where I'm centered right now, but I will have some novels out in the future. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We have an amazing panel today. We have people who are writing in different genres all over the country. You're what I love about it is everybody's doing these activist activities. You know, we're big on, you know, when you're a writer, you're so insightful. I feel like that's why I love interviewing writers is that we're so insightful because it's what comes with the brand. You know, when you're writing, you have to research, you have to know things, you have to engage. And I think it opens up so many of us to different things like mentoring and working with youth and working with mental health issues. All these things, whether the writing comes from it or it draws out the writing, it really writing the books and putting our thoughts and feelings on paper is a great and therapeutic way to deal with the things that we're dealing with. Like Ms. Rogers said, you know, she's been out there. She wanted to share her story. She wanted to share her story. And that's what most of us, all of us are trying to do. Whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, the goal is to share your story. But traditionally, I mean, historically, the Black story has not been a story that I feel like Hollywood and the book industry, the traditional book history industry has really welcomed. The Black experience. And that's why we're going to be talking about writing the Black experience. From a diversity perspective and the importance of diversity in writing. We're going to look at this from 2 angles. One is our writing our own stories and having the confidence to write our own stories as raw as they can be. How many of you have heard, I'm so tired of Black people writing about violence and, you know, ghetto communities and this and this and abuse. Everybody writes about these things, not just Black people, but for some reason we sometimes get drawn into our story is so hard, it's so harsh, it's sad. Well, it's not true. It is our story, and our story on this continent has been harsh. I mean, let's be honest with you. We came here because, you know, because of slavery. So to now say that our stories aren't valid or no one cares about the Black experience is a very unfair gesture to make. And it's something that I want to debunk right now with this conversation with all of you. We're going to talk about diversity from the writing side, and we're going to talk about diversity from the publishing side. But first, I want to hear from a few of you on what does diversity in writing mean to you? Anybody want to take that? You can throw your hand up, or Ariana.
Good morning. So diversity means to me is that you encompass everything from a culture. So that means the positives and the negatives. As you mentioned earlier, Michelle, you know, like some people feel that as a writer of color that we often just focus on the negative sides. But in order to highlight what positivity there is, sometimes we do have to highlight the negative aspects. Also, it's a matter of acceptance because as a Black writer, you know, you go through a journey. You go through a journey of you're starting off as an author, you're learning how to write, you're learning how to communicate with the public. And sometimes our way of communication, people don't understand. They don't understand, you know, the African American dialect. They don't understand our journey. They don't understand the problems we have because they're not Black. They can't necessarily relate to that. So that's one important thing in diversity is that you encompass everything as much as possible.
I love that acceptance and understanding that our experiences are different, but different doesn't mean bad. And different, like you said, sometimes you have to deal with the pain to get to the positive. And everyone deals with pain. I remember once I was in a write and critique group. My second book, From Darkness to Night, is about a young lady who's dealing with mental illness. Her brother is murdered. She blames herself for it because she was a part of, she was dating a drug dealer who she ended up taking something from, and he put a hit out on her, and she thinks that he killed her brother. And I'm in this group, and there's this older lady, and she reads a couple of pages of it, and she says, "Oh, it's just so sad." And I remember kind of sitting back, and I'm like, okay, I know we all want to know that the beautiful woman rides off on the horse at the end of every story, right? Every story has a happy ending, and I do know that readers like a happy ending, and most of us are going to give our readers a happy ending to some degree. But the reality is getting there you're going to go through some sadness, because what is there to redeem? What is the redemption from if you don't start with a little sadness in it, right? And it was just when she said sad, it kind of shook me. Anybody had that kind of experience with their writing where someone, Ashawn, talk to us about it.
I get asked all the time why horror, because most people think about the gory aspects of horror, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the sadness, and no one wants to hear a sad story or talk about the trauma, but we're only portrayed a certain way through media right now. So everybody sees us in one particular box, and we haven't learned how to deal with our own trauma. So for us to tell diverse stories with diverse personalities that have certain particular traumas that they go through, it's important to work through it to get to that happy ending. And the only way to do it is to work through it. Like I said, put it on paper, have discussions about it like we are in this panel. So I get a lot of questions about why horror, why you're writing about mental illness, why are you putting things like that out there. My first book covers Black men, depression and anxiety, and not wanting to get help because they feel like it makes them look weak. Why are you talking about this? And then I have to go through the whole, it's kind of like an elevator pitch, really, just to tell them, no, seek your help, talk to someone who's qualified, not just friends and family, and work through your trauma, because that's the only way you're going to have your positive aspects of life that you can actually enjoy and appreciate. So,
love it. Writing the Black experience. We are writing the Black experience. There are, and I'm going to get to you, Pepper. I see your hands up. The thing that's so interesting about what you said is there are so many taboos that we culturally, community, family, religion, that we have to overcome to write. Like when you decide to write something, you have to, I always say, you make a contract with yourself to be authentic and transparent. You have to make that contract. You have to say to yourself, how far do I want? What am I willing to reveal? Because there's always going to be someone to question it. Now, I don't know if all writers deal with that. I'm assuming they do, but I can tell you as an African American writer, there are a lot of things, I remember I wrote my first book and I had family to say, am I in the book? They were really worried about being in the book. I had someone to tell me that I would go to jail. It's a fictional book, that I would go to jail for telling this story if it's a true story. I was like, I know what the word fiction means, everybody. It's fiction. Like I had to answer questions that I wasn't prepared for it, because I was just being a creator and enjoying the process. And then on the other side of it, there are all these questions because people are worried about, are you going to say something that's going to impact the family? Are you going to say something that's going to offend your religion? As an African American writer, am I the only one? But it feels like our layers of getting to a place where people can see us as a storyteller, there's just too many of them. There's just too many layers of it. Okay, you write horror. Why would you write horror? What is it that they want you to write about? What is the fun, whimsical place that everybody's comfortable with? I just don't know. Ms. Rogers, talk to us, because you said a lot of things about, and I'm going to get to you, Pepper. I'm sorry. You said a lot of things about how you exposed things in your life, in your book, hard things about your past. How did you get to that place where you felt comfortable doing that?
Well, actually, I didn't at first. when I wrote my first book, I broke out of prison. It was a struggle. Even though I know that I was supposed to be writing it, it was still a struggle. Like, okay, let me write. Okay, no, I don't want to know. No, they can't know that. And I'm like, okay, okay. And it was a struggle, but I started and I finished it, and it got published. And when I wrote I Broke Out of Prison, this is a diversity book, for different people, different diversity of people. They flock to the book. They want to know what happened. A lot of people cannot believe their eyesight that I had been locked up in prison, and they want to read and know all about what happened. Like, wow, look at you. What in the world happened? Like, I've got to get this. So it talks about a lot of different things, trauma, drama, mental illness, different things, family, and even some of the words that you said. Some people that I know, was wondering this, and that. And so I had to set it straight. Hold up now. This is my book. I wrote it, and hey, it's out there. It ain't going nowhere. It's impacting lives, And so, yeah, so it's just, it talks about a lot of different diversity of things. And I'm just so glad I put it out there. And just different people, they want to know, they buy it, they read it, and they get to see, what all really happened to this lady named Ratia Rogers. So it's a really good one. It turned out to be really good. I'm not getting attacked from different people, according to my book. They actually love me and love my story. The start of it starts out different, the middle of it, and the ending is beautiful. And so from a different diversity of people, they actually love it. I know we all get in different angles, we get different feedback, different thoughts, different topics come up, with all of our books as authors, but everybody's side effects are totally different.
Yeah. Pepper?
I was thinking about this concept of diversity. So with my book, with Harlem's Awakening, it's 1940s fiction, and I'm inspired by Ratia, you being in Tulsa. I'm inspired by how when Black folks had money. So why can't we tell stories with Black folks having money? So my story is about a woman who inherits a good amount of money when her parents pass away. And I turned my book into a one-woman show and performed it. And afterwards, this man who was white, and he said, "Oh man, I love your character. It's so great. But why would she have all that money? Like, that doesn't seem believable." Mm-hmm. And that's why I wrote it, because we did have money. We can have money. We have it now, and we will have money. And if we don't tell these stories that show us like that, people will keep thinking we can't have it. So that's the type of diversity I'm dealing with. I like to show us in ways that people, that we're not always seen for one way, kind of like Ashana, you're talking about with horror. We know in this room we are multifaceted, and I have Black female villains. I have Black female, that are doing all kinds of things, because we do all kinds of things. And so that's how I deal with diversity in my stories. That's what I wanted to mention. Yeah.
You know what? We're gonna tear down the walls of this box that we've been putting in during this conversation, everybody, because I don't know how we got in this box. I think it was very convenient, to place Black people in a box that said, this is your story. Your story can't be about wealth, because that's not representative of you. It can't be about love, because Black people don't love. It can't be about creativity, because you don't understand. You see what I'm saying? The box, it's the box that we're in, and then there is the box that we have chosen to not come out of, and we continue to push this narrative in our own community that we are to be looked at in a certain way. And we have to tear down those walls. Why is it hard for someone to read a story about us that's about wealth, when so many of us, everybody didn't grow up in poverty? Some people has never even experienced poverty. So whatever. And I hear this a lot from writers who say, I write a book. That was another girl on here last month who said, I wrote my book and I was talking about growing up in an affluent area in Atlanta. And my white editor said, that's not real. That's not real. No one's going to connect with that. And so this box that we're in, we have to tear down these walls, because our stories, my story is unique because I'm African American and I bring a certain flair and culture to it. But I'm an American. Okay, I'm just a person, and to say that I have to be limited to certain things is just completely unfair. Anybody want to talk about this diversity in writing? What does diversity in writing mean to you, Joyce?
Okay. I think a big reason is that the focus has always been on, on the diversity and putting us in a box. Let's discuss that a little bit. Is that people don't know our history or, the history of our ancestors. We've been storytelling since the 13th century, the griots.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that. You know what I'm saying? Was it the Mali? The griot started in Mali. And we've passed that on. Well, we used to, but we used to pass that on from generation to generation. The grandmothers, our families, were so tight. I think I, discussed it in the last one where we all grew up together. My mother was the elder. So if anyone wanted to come to where we lived, they would stay with us first. They would get settled, they would get enough money, and then they would go not too far from us, and we don't have that today. And then there's a separation of and I hate it's just another label like the Xers, Generation X, Y, Z. We're all human beings. Those are more boxes that we're put in to, make sure that we don't come together as people of color, as brown people. There's no such thing as black and white. These are labels to divide us even further. I ain't never seen no true black folks. Have you? I've never, if they were white, they'd be transparent. Okay? You feel me?
I love that. Anybody else want to give your, okay, Simone?
Really quick, I just wanted to speak to just representation as a whole, because I remember growing up as a little girl, the books I read, it was always about a little girl that didn't look like me. And so I wanted to see myself in those stories. And then I'm definitely a geek, a nerd when it comes to like sci-fi, Star Wars, those types of things. And there are limited characters that represent me in those genres. It's like you have tons of characters from a different alien race from outer space, but yet you don't have Black people at the helm of these books. Mm-hmm. And so when I wrote the Falling Scion series, it's more of a post-apocalyptic, so like thinking Mad Max. I grew up watching Mad Max, one of my favorite series, but the only representation that I had was Tina Turner. So now I get to write my heroines as strong Black women and they win, as opposed to being the downfall of society. They get to rebuild society. And so I want my young daughters, to see themselves in the books, not only that I write, but other books that are out there, and not be an adult until they realize that there are Black authors representing them when they see it, because it's bad enough that they watch TV and they're just now beginning to see themselves, but it's not always painted in a light that would be positive for how I want to raise my girls and raise my son. And so making sure that the stories that I create, they can just see themselves and have that reflection of like, wow, my mom, who is a strong Black woman, wrote this about other strong Black people. And to what Pepper was saying, like, it doesn't always have to be the poverty. Like, you can represent the wealth, you can represent all these different, facets of different genres, and have it come together in a way to where people feel seen. So that's all I wanted to say.
Excellent. Winifred, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of Simone, like as a fantasy author, you don't really see literally no characters of color, let alone Black characters. And when you do, they're usually just to help the white character or to help them find something, or they're going to die in the next chapter. They're not really a focal point. And when I wrote The Child of Tempest and the subsequent other books, I've had other people read it and be like, oh, like, yeah, there's white people, but I was surprised that there's a Black princess in it. I was surprised that there's a Black queen and Black villains. And, it's something that shouldn't be surprising. It's something that should be normal to us, that it shouldn't be like a breath of fresh air or a realization that even that a Black author is writing a Black princess, that that shouldn't be like something that is eye-opening to some people. And it is, because our stories aren't told no matter what genre we write. Even if we do write in fantasy or nonfiction or biographies, like our stories are always trying to be edited or changed or perceived in only one way. So for me, like, diversity is being able to have the ability to tell your story however you see fit, and be able to show that there are different people, where it be disabilities, mental health, race, gender, all of it. I think that's how we really come to diversity, when it's realistic. We have all these different types of people on the planet, so those should be reflected in the books we have on shelves.
I believe, and thank you, ladies, and that excellent round. I believe that that's why we're seeing the books being banned and CRT being challenged, is because of technology. We now have the access to put our information out there on our own. The gatekeepers can't keep us out anymore. You want to marginalize us in this industry of writing and say nobody wants to read our stories. It's not true. To say that we can't write our stories because we're not creative and smart enough to do it, to say that we don't understand fantasy and sci-fi and we're not deep enough to really tackle those issues. We can't tackle self-help issues as well. All of that is done so that the world doesn't know the true story of our past, because there are still too many people in this country who are afraid of that story. They don't want to accept that, yes, slavery happened. It really tore up our community, but yet we're still magical people. We're still here. We're still thriving. And our stories give us an opportunity. Self-publishing gives us an opportunity to put that work out there. The gatekeepers can't flag it down and say, no, nobody wants to read about the little girl who grows up, in the big mansion, but who's molested and has to deal with that and has to overcome that. They don't read about the Black princesses. Nobody wants to read about that. That's what the industry is saying, but we know it's not true. And every year, over 1 million books are being published, self-published. And these are stories, many of them, people don't know, but a lot of these stories are written by women, because there are so many white men that have books that are published by traditional publishers and getting the big checks. But there are a lot of women out there who are writing and want to tell our stories, but the gatekeepers have kept us out as well. So I'm happy to hear that everyone understands that this idea of diversity in writing, we shouldn't even have to have this conversation. No one should be questioning my ability to do anything at this stage of life, but they are. And so we have to keep pushing against it and keep reminding them that we're just like everyone else. Okay. We tell stories. I mean, look at us. We're the dancing, singing, the most amazing group of people. If you want to have fun, come to a Black family reunion. You want to, there is so much creativity in our culture, but yet we can't tell a story. That doesn't make any sense. And as Joyce said, we've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. I won't even go into, some of the books that are the first that were written by us, but we absolutely. So let's talk about now the gatekeepers and getting into how do we fix this traditional publishing world, or just, it's not even about fixing them as much as it is about making sure that our work can hit the mainstream. I read a very interesting article a couple of days ago that talked about discrimination, and it says publishers discriminate against women and Black authors, but readers don't. Anybody want to tell a story and help us to better understand? Ariana, talk to us about that topic, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I've done and what I've learned in that area as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi again. One thing that I've learned in terms of like the publishing industry overall, and any industry when it comes to Black people, is that sometimes we have to create our own to build up our own. And that is one thing that I notice across the publishing industry in terms of traditional publishing. You don't see many Black publishing companies. I think that's one way to get our story out, to have it to where there's not gatekeeping, to have it where there's editors that understand us and to get our story out. So it's just a matter of reframing the industry to where it's beneficial. As Pepper and a couple of others mentioned, we want money in our communities. That's how you get money, is by building our own and constantly evolving and making sure that that money flow is within our communities. Because if you notice, like any other cultural community, they're really good about that. They're really good about building industries within their cultural communities and making sure the money stays there. And that's what Black people need to start doing. This is how we'll get our matter of respect. We'll be able to make sure our history's out there. This is all important for that.
And for decades, so many of our Black leaders have been preaching this. Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, build your own community up. That is essential. That's why I started the Black Writers Workspace. I also spun out another business called directtoauthor.com, which allows our writers to put your books on this platform and then have the platform link back to your website so that you can make money off of your book sales. This is what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we have those avenues, because I've read so many amazing things about this whole traditional publishing world. First, you can't get a deal unless you have 50,000 followers on Twitter. Anybody know anything? I do social media management. In order to even get there, you got to put money into that. To get to 50,000 followers, to get to 50 million followers, to get whatever, you have to either be a celebrity or you have to put a lot of money behind that. That's not an easy thing to do. Also, you're going to do a lot of the marketing yourself still with those deals. And so it's just so many different pieces to it. We have to start building ourselves up and moving things ahead on our own. There are a lot of comments coming in, guys. I'm going to get to let's go to you, Ashan, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about this article and then get some of these questions in.
I just remember I wanted to say, when I was going through the writing process and I've completed my book, I was trying to make a decision on whether I should query or self-publish. Then I came to the decision that I didn't want someone that's sitting behind a desk that doesn't have any experience, whether they be a person of color, or I didn't need their validation to tell the story I wanted to tell. And I felt self-publishing was the best route. And I agree with you, Abriana. We need our own publishing companies so people can identify with the stories that we're telling. But I think more importantly, we need our own marketing companies. 90% of being a self-published author is marketing. And if we have the marketing firms that can target the people we're trying to target, that we can rotate our own dollars into, I think it would help tremendously, even more than having our own publishing companies.
In the last 50 years, I read that only 5% of the books published by traditional publishers were books by African American writers. 5%. Think about that. Now, that leaves this assumption that we either can't write or we can't write of books that mainstream readers want to read. The idea is, though, that mainstream readers are all white people who don't want to read about the Black experience. And what this article that I read, which was so well written, is basically saying is that it's not true. That readers are really open to reading books by Black authors, but it's the publishing industry that it has not woken up to the fact that we are doing this. Now, I'm going to give mad props to Netflix and a lot of these new platforms that are creating stories that are about a very diverse group of people. I don't know. I watch a lot of movies. I probably watch about 15 movies a week. I just want to let you guys know that I'm a movie geek and I watch movies all the time because they help me with my writing. And I can tell you that to see characters that are diverse, Hollywood, these movies aren't going to the big screen, everybody. These are movies that are being created on Netflix or by Hulu, and they are bringing in a very diverse group of people. I was watching a movie the other day where there was a young a young Black man. He was Irish and Black, who was he was an escort, a prostitute pretty much, and he was sleeping with this older white woman. I don't know if you guys seen this movie. It is amazing. It was amazing. I would have never seen that. Never, ever. It was a great movie because what it did was it talked about women and aging and how we are still wanting to be sexual beings. She's 70 something years old. She's an Oscar winning actress. And this young black man she's having sex with, and I'm just going, this is something I wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. So I feel like there is somebody, like you said, Ashawn, who's listening and saying, these gatekeepers don't need to keep your stories down. You just have to keep pushing. We got to find our own avenues. Simone, you had a question or comment?
Really quick, I don't want to eat up too much time from the comments you're about to jump into, but as a publishing consultant, I really like the company that I work with because they do promote that type of diversity. And I think the biggest thing is educating people on what publishing is probably the thing that I focus on most, because I can get tons and tons of authors, and yes, I can take your manuscripts, but if you're not even educated about publishing itself, where your book is getting ready to go, what's going to happen, because in spite of you signing with a publishing company, you're still going to have to do a lot of self-promotion, like one of you guys said earlier. And so just making sure that people have a realistic idea on what it means to actually promote their book, what it actually means when it comes down to the contracts of your publishing company. So I always start there first, regardless of what the book is about. Let's just start with, do you know what we offer? Do you know what publishing means? Do you know the difference between self-publishing versus vanity versus traditional? And getting them educated first, so that way, whether they sign with us or not, you feel confident about whatever direction you're going to go in. And I think that helps later on when authors target their audience. So if I only want to target a certain demographic of people, I can execute that successfully because I know exactly what's going to be expected on my behalf. So that's all I wanted to say. Just chiming in on that.
Absolutely. That's really, thank you. Share all the information that you can, because we've definitely done some roundtables to talk about the different types of publishing. And I agree with you. You have to understand what it is. Now, when I published my first book in 2010, self-publishing still, in my opinion, was a little taboo. It was like, if you self-publish, it was because no one thought your work was worth publishing for you. And I had to get over that. I was like, wait a minute, that can't be the case, because it's so few of us that are actually getting these deals. So that's not fair. But self-publishing is becoming more of the norm. And I believe that self-publishing is the future of publishing. I think that I believe that traditional publishers, although they are, coming together and building these huge conglomerates and trying to take over the industry, I still believe that there is a committee sitting at a table now figuring out, how do we deal with self-published authors, because they're coming for us. We are coming for them. As long as, if we've got avenues like, filmmakers who will take on our books, and we find ways to publish and own more of what we make, and, get it out there, have these larger marketing strategies, like you said, Sean, where we have our own marketing tools to help us push these books, we are going to put a dent into their back pockets. And trust me, they don't want to lose money. So I do believe that these industries are trying to figure out, how do we incorporate more self-published books? How do we help them? What do we do? Because my fear with this idea that social media followers are going to lead the way in who gets published, I just feel like in 20 years, all of our books are going to be written by the most popular TikTokers, celebrities, athletes. What about good literature? What about good literature? Would Shakespeare have had 50 million followers on? This is the kind of thing that bothers me about what we're doing with in our literary world, is that we have to make sure that our books continue to get out there. And I'm not seeing that the big boys are thinking about it long term, because some of these books that are hitting the market are not that good. I'm sorry. They're not blowing me away. But let's get to some of these questions, everybody. Some of them are just comments. We'll pop a few up on the screen. Here's one that said, from Tidra. She said, in my first book, I had readers who were readers be really surprised and happy that the women weren't backstabbing each other, but were supporting one another during their downtimes. I didn't want the messy drama. Once again, this is the box. The box is, Black women, we can't get along. We don't know how to build wealth. We don't know how to do countless things that will make us successful. So when you build a character that doesn't fit that narrative, there are people who go, oh, that's not true. Black women can't get along. Absolutely. You see this as we, once again, write our Black experience, is that the experience in this world, our Black experience is still overshadowed by this narrative that we are a negative and not a positive. Anybody want to talk a little bit about that? Have you had that kind of experience where someone said, I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but where someone said that that couldn't have happened because that's not the Black way of doing things? And that's exactly what that says. There's not the Black women can't get along because that's not what Black women do. Anybody? Winnie, do you want to talk?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Sorry. For me, it was a beta reader who was a bit confused on. So one of my characters, she's a Black princess. Her name's Arcelia, and they were like speaking because my parents are from Africa, so a lot of my stories and the lore is inspired by African lore and stories. So like when there's something that would happen that's more pertaining cultural wise, you'd be confused. You'd be like, why does this happen? Or I don't get this, or I'm not. And I'm like, well, not everything is for you to get. It's just to be a story to be told. And not every story you read, you're going to understand. I read a story, that was set in the Middle East. I don't know much about Middle East culture. I'm not well versed in it, but I still enjoyed the story. And the author had wrote a lot about it, and you could tell she put a lot of heart into it and was basing it off a lot of her culture and family. And I truly appreciated that because I got to learn more about something I didn't know too much about. I didn't say, oh, well, from what I know, that doesn't make sense. From what I know, that doesn't fit my narrative. And it's like, it's not supposed to. It's supposed to fit the author's narrative of what they're portraying. So sometimes readers get surprised when you don't fit the narrative of what they've already construed about Black people, what they've construed about women, what they construed about the Black experience. So when you write based off of what you know, it does sometimes shock people or confuse them because they're not used to that type of narrative or that type of point of view. So, yeah.
And that's all the reason why we have to continue to write and continue to tell these diverse stories and not kind of fall prey to these stereotypes about Black people. I think that is, if we don't do it and we continue to push the narrative that no, we are multifaceted, we can do all things, we can live in unison with other women, we can fall in love, we can do all these things, and we can be Black princesses if we continue to push that. And that's what, like I said, the self-publishing is getting around the gatekeepers who are very comfortable with keeping us, if you're not fighting, and don't even let me get into these reality shows, if we're not fighting and tearing each other's, weave out, then we're not happy. We're not satisfied with that's not true. I don't know people that live like that. I've crossed some, but I don't know a lot of people that live like that. But that's what you see, and that's something we have to continuously push against. Anybody else want to talk about this? Pepper?
I would add on, we have this thing that's going around about what's marketable too. We're coming out of these generations of what was marketable, and this is what you're going to consume and learn about Black folks, and we're all trying to change that. So having an awareness about what cycle we are in is interesting too.
Absolutely. I think that, this is a really good conversation to have around the ideas of coming out of these stereotypes. So let's see what else we have here. You have to know your audience and stick with them. If they question your why, they're simply not your audience. Brush the dirt off and move on. I love that because
shout out to my husband. That's his comment.
Yay, husband! Hello, husband.
Because, like I said, we have so many layers to overcome to get to that confidence to put our work out there. And then you have people who will just, like, I remember writing my first book, 80,000 words. I was so excited it's published. And someone read it and go, oh, I love your book, but I found a typo in it. And I remember kind of having that moment of, oh, and then I was going, wait a minute. I just wrote 80,000 words, okay? It was professionally edited. I've read best-selling books with typos in them. please stop, diminishing the work over something that's simple. How many of us have seen bad movies in the theater? Movies that have been millions of dollars have been put into them and they're no good. This is one of the few industries, in my opinion, where we are expected to be perfect. Whereas in the film industry, they honor their independent filmmakers. They honor them. You get the big, pretty, little layout on screen. Not with our and not in our industry. You have to be perfect. So that becomes a problem for me. Ashan, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I had a discussion with my wife about this actually, and it's people pointing out or trying to degrade your work, and I was like, every time I feel like I have imposter syndrome, just remember somebody wrote Sharknado, somebody actually filmed Sharknado, somebody made 7 Sharknadoes. I think you can do this.
I love that. The Sharknado theory. That's it, everybody. Remember that. Okay. I mean, excellent point. I mean, but it's, I'll have people say, well, I like this book better than I like that one. I'm like, it's not a football game. We're not competing, everybody. I mean, every book is for a different audience. This may not be the book for you. So I love that idea of bringing up the audience, know your audience, and write for them if you can. And maybe the audience is a very small group of people. It may not be for everyone. So that's something to think about. It says, yes, my fiction tends to focus on upper middle class because that's the environment I know and grew up in. It's funny how I've been criticized by people who say that's not Black. Exactly. Michelle, Purple Ink is hosting a writer's workshop in Virginia Beach next month. So I hope everybody will attend. So thank you, Purple Ink, for being a part of this and for posting this question. But absolutely, once again, it's the box. And we're going to break down those walls. Every Black person doesn't live the same existence. Some of us grew up in poverty. Some of us grew up middle class. Some of us have wealth. Some of us are articulate, or some people say sound white. I can't stand that. Some of us, there are so many different layers to who we are, and we have to honor those layers. So I love that. Anybody want to add in to this question, Pepper?
I was actually going to weave in this other concept about our perfectionism and professionalism. And, people do want us to be perfect because I don't know, because we made it, because we took a chance and we did the work. Now it's got to be perfect. That's weird. Can it be professional? Yes. And as being a copywriter and a ghostwriter and stuff, I will help other authors to make their book as good as it can. Or did I even say that right? To be as great as it can. And even in my book, I did have typos. And when I saw it, it was like, holy crap, like, how can there be a mistake? There are mistakes in the world. It doesn't mean I'm a less of a writer. It doesn't mean I'm not, that it's even not professional, but you try to make it as professional as you can. And as long as we keep also helping other writers coming up behind us be professional, please, like you said, Simone, learn this industry, know what it's like, and know what it's like to self-publish and put out the best cover, all that kind of stuff. So that concept of perfectionism and professionalism is an interesting layer for us specifically.
Absolutely. Pepper, I'm sorry, Wendy, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was going to piggyback off of, excuse me, what was I going to say? Oh, about, again, perfection, can't say it. Being perfect. Let me say that. I remember I had a reviewer. She had emailed me. She's like, I love the book. It's great. But on page 163, I think you misspelled this one word in like the first paragraph. And I was like, like, I didn't know. I was like, thank you. Like, in the whole 50,000 plus word, just one word, one paragraph, one page, like, had to email me to make sure I knew that it might have been misspelled, or like there was a comma missing. And I think that was the first time, because I had always been so worried about, again, editing and making sure the book was perfect and making sure there were no mistakes. And then I had to realize, I was like, I've read books who have been traditionally published, and I'm like, oh, that is not the correct correct word. That is not where you put that comma. That has too many spaces, or that made no sense. That sentence had to read it 4 or 5 times. Still don't know what it means. So I had to really, again, let go and be like, it's okay to have mistakes. There is no such thing as a perfect edited book. I don't care how many editors you go, there's always going to be one little mistake that someone misses, and that's okay. It happens. But you have to take it with a grain of salt, because there's always going to be someone who comments or reviews or be like, well, there was this one mistake and I didn't, and that's why I'm giving this book 3 stars. And it's like, well, like that's not who your ideal reader is. This isn't the person who's nitpicking for the 3 mistakes you've made in a 100,000 word book or 80,000 word book. You know, it's the person who read the book, who connected with the story, who connected with the characters, even though you had one misspelled word. That's who you're looking to read and write for. It's not, you know, the person who's always nitpicking, because those people are always going to exist, no matter what it is. Even for movies, you know, there'll be people. I'm a Marvel fan, so I know how it is with like Marvel books and Marvel stories and the movies, and then I also read the comics. So there's always, oh, it's not the right, you know, there's always going to be people to critique and judge, but those aren't the people, you know. Take everything with a grain of salt. Like, sometimes I do learn from reviews and comments to help better my work, but I also know that not everything I need to take in as critique. Sometimes it's just people nitpicking, or people just don't connect with your story, and you know, that's normal and it happens.
Absolutely. And we now have Lady Hulk. Whoever did that, I think should be
Oh boy,
killed. That's a whole other conversation. I love DC and I love Avengers. I'm passionate about those things. So we do have to think about, you know, there's this is art. This is art. And my art may not be for you. You may not get it. It's just like a drawing. I mean, people see artwork and some people love it and some people hate it. That's happened. This is art. But for those who are out there who are wondering how we do what we do, this is hard work to write a book. It is hard work. You know, so when you nitpick me on one word, it floors me, but it also makes me say, I don't think you know that this book took me 5 years to write. I have to organize my thoughts. I mean, there are so many pieces to it. My last book took me 3 years to write, 5 years to get the nerve to put it out, because I was so afraid and fearful of what people would make of it, because it was kind of hidden home, close to home with some things. And so we have a lot to overcome as writers. And so give us a little grace. Sometimes we're going to need it. This is a question I really want to put up, and then we're going to get back to our conversation. It says, oh, yeah, it didn't bother me not seeing myself in books until I started reading fantasy. I had the Eric Jerome Dickey and the Zane, but I did know about Octavia Butler growing up. There are people who never understood that Octavia Butler was writing sci-fi. I read Kendrick years ago, and I absolutely loved it. But no one ever, not a teacher, anyone said this is sci-fi. So when people say, you know, Black people don't write sci-fi, we've been writing sci-fi for a long time, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Octavia Butler never became a best-selling author until she was deceased.
What?
That was just a couple of years ago. She was, oh no, I'm sorry, she was not on the New York Times best-selling list. Yeah, same thing. Then until I think 2020, and I think she passed several years ago. So when you think about this idea, this box that we're in, that we can only write about certain things, it has to be drama filled, that we don't understand sci-fi, fantasy, speculative, you know, fiction. We can't write in these genres because they are too much imagination, you know, involved in that. And we obviously don't have any imagination. I mean, we did come up with twerking, but that's another thing. What we have amazing imagination. We have been writing, as Joyce said, forever, forever. So somebody talk to me about this topic of seeing yourself in works in the past, and how, Joyce, let's talk about that.
All right. I grew up on romance novels. We all know the romance novels are like the bread and butter of the literary world. It wasn't until I found Beverly Jenkins that, you know, I could really relate. And it was so hilarious because I was so geeked that I gave it to my, my nieces and nephews. I grew up with them, right? I gave it to my niece, and she was just so floored by the cover. I remember the first cover was Night Song. Oh my goodness. The guy on that, he was so adorable, right? But anywho, and when my niece saw that, she was like, oh my God, she really wrote this. The lack of representation. That's what, is what I'm trying to make for. And then Zane, and, I discovered
Mm-hmm.
others, but I had to discover them,
Mm-hmm.
but discovering them gave me, just such a great feeling, and like what you're doing, Michelle. And like, I just went to a writer's weekend. I mean, I felt so freaking inspired. Met Terry McMillan.
Mm-hmm.
This woman won $40 million because she took charge of her marketing. They wasn't marketing her. So,
And one of my favorite books, Disappearing Acts. I don't know if you guys read that book, but
yes.
that was the first book I read that really dealt with relationships in a real way for me. And as a young person growing up, I was like, this is dynamic. Like, oh my goodness. It wasn't highly sexual. It was just about a relationship between a man and a woman. If you guys haven't seen it, go watch the movie. It is amazing. So this is something that is important. Pepper, did you have a comment?
I was going to say Beverly was on NPR last weekend or 2 weekends ago, if you want to try and look it up, talking exactly about this with another Black romance author.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So Purple Ink wants to know about the article that I'm talking about. I definitely will. I'll send that over to you, Neely. But this article, it really references the fact that our readers are open to our work, but the publishing industry is not. So that gives us kind of a leg up on marketing too. So for those of you who are writing, know that there is an audience for you, and it's not just one group. It's if you are a reader, and let's talk a little bit about this. If you are a reader, you're there to stretch your imagination. No one reads just to read a story about somebody who's just like them. I never read a book because I'm looking for a character that's doing everything I'm doing. That's boring. I'm reading because I want to stretch my imagination. I want to read about the werewolves and I love memoirs. So I love to hear about those real stories. Tell me about what you've experienced, what you've seen, that stuff draws me in. So this idea that white readers won't read Black work, it's not true. Now, I did a survey a couple of about a year ago that I got myself in a little trouble over. I surveyed about 3 online groups that had about 125,000 readers in them. On a late Friday night, I put out the question, how many books written by Black self-published authors have you purchased in the last 12 months? And these books were filled with primarily white readers. I didn't really think I was doing anything until I woke up the next morning. I had 1,300 comments. And I was called racist for asking the question. I was, but I wrote a piece on it in medium.com if you want to read it, but it really did open my eyes to the fact that there are still a lot of readers who are living under the I don't see race theory. I was called racist because I'm trying to bring up an issue and create drama between the races, which I really wasn't. I was just trying to see how many people were actually buying our work. But the comments were so interesting to me because there were so many people who say, I don't see race when I buy a book. And I had a hard time understanding that. So Ratia, talk to us a little bit about this idea of seeing race. For me, I want you to know that I'm an African American writer because I bring with it a lot of my culture and my ideas. I'm going to put myself on the back cover of my books. A lot of people won't because of this thing called, this idea that people won't buy your books. I called out Ratia, but anybody, if you want to.
Yes, absolutely. I was
waiting
to talk, and I'm going to say, go ahead and jump right on in this. And afterwards, you already know I did speak to you. I have a book signing. So after I speak, I'm going to go ahead and exit out, and I appreciate you very, very much. God bless every single one of you all. I wish you much successes. But I'm going to go ahead and jump right on in now. When I wrote my first book, I broke out of prison dealing with different diversity of people, Black, white, Indian people. I've got Indian and white in me as well. White people, all kind of, Mexican and people. They love my story. They read it. They understand what all I went through. My topics that I talk about. Talking about facing different things, different issues, and they give me great feedback, and they just love me. They love my book, and I don't have any problems with that. And as well, I know that it's still, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so we have the Black Wall Street, down here, where we get a lot of people from out of state. I've met people just walking around and having a good time, eating lunch at the Wine Days. Is like a famous restaurant down here where it's good soul food and all of that. But what I'm saying, a lot of people, they come down here and they walk and they take pictures of the wall, the paintings and stuff that we have. And me as a speaker person, as a social person, as an author and a writer, I'll talk and they'll buy the book at the drop of a hat. White people, different people. And also, I was going to say, I know that racism has been going on for so long and this and that, but my family never taught us, never taught me to be prejudiced or anything like that, due to the race riot, the worst one here in Tulsa, or whatever. I'm just saying that I love all, and I'm here for all. And also, I did get my I broke out of prison. It's printed out in Spanish, and I just launched a French version for the beautiful Haitians as well. So I know that, like I said, everybody have different different things that have happened, or different topics and all of that, according to our books as authors that we've talked about, that we see, that we face. But mine is no problem at all. Like, I don't get Caucasian people, white people saying, wow, da 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 da, this and that. I mean, they smile at me, they love me, they buy it, they're proud of me. They'll even donate to my ministry as well. So, but yeah, so
Okay.
but. Yeah, thank you very much for this
Thank
opportunity.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for your comments, and good luck with your book. Congratulations on all of your successes. We are going to stay in contact with you, and we're going to definitely support you as well. So I know you have to go, so good luck with your book signing.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, everybody. Thank you so much. Today.
So I know, Sean, you have your hand up. Let's talk about this. So, it was this survey for me opened my eyes. I was very offended to be called racist, but I did address that because I didn't want anybody to think that was my approach. But this idea that I don't see race in reading it, I read all books. If that was the case, then we know a lot more of us would be selling thousands of books. So this idea that I don't see color, I know that that sounds very comfortable to certain people, but for me, I want you to see and know that that I'm different and that I'm bringing this to the table. Anybody else, are you the type of person in this question here about maybe Octavia didn't, did the publisher say Octavia wasn't sci-fi in order to sell it? I'm sure that many of us have felt that way, that we had to not show that we're African American in order to sell our books. Let's talk a little bit about that. Ashawn, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I going through the publishing process, and when I had some beta readers, they had some particular words for me when it came to me pointing out issues, and especially when it had anything to do with the character being Black, or I specifically mentioned it. To those people that want to call you racist, because you brought that point up, I would say that they aren't your readers. But I think a lot of people are nerd to their reality, and they shun our books because they just might find out that we're not that different from them. Mm-hmm. And everything that they're taught, their whole reality might crumble around taking in new information that goes against what they actually believe. So I don't think they'll actually give it an opportunity. So they do see color. But as a Black man, I wanted to make sure my face was on the back of my book, so everybody knows where that information was coming from, who told this story, And if you can relate to it, then maybe you learn something about yourself, regardless of your color.
Love that. Love that. Absolutely. There were other things that I heard in this survey as well. I heard a lot of white readers say, I want to read more books by Black writers, but I don't know how to find them because in my, where I get my books from, there's not a lot of access. I live in a rural community. I don't have access to, I don't know how to find independent books, which is a challenge. I must admit, you got to remember when you're on Amazon, you're competing with 30 million other books. You are literally competing with the Bible, is what I always say when your book is on Amazon. So unless you have a really clean marketing and a very effective marketing strategy, it's hard to find our work. And that's why I created the direct to author, because it's all about indie books. However, I think that you hit it on the head. We have to, there are going to be people who won't read our books because we're Black and they don't think they can connect with the Black story. But our story is not always so different from everybody else's story. If you really look at a story, you're going to have, a challenge, somebody who is going through something. You're going to have supporting staff, supporting actors, people who are going to work with them and help them, especially when it comes to fiction. They're going to be going through something, which is the challenge that the reader is going to really gauge and get into. And hopefully you'll have a redemption period. Well, somebody's going to learn something. It bothers me to say that somebody will look at a book and see a Black person and say, I don't want to read this story because they're Black, when all of us grew up reading books by everybody in school. Think about how many books you read in high school and who wrote those books, right? So anybody else wanted to chime in on this idea of putting your cover? I don't see my names on here anymore. Brianna. Brianna.
So I just wanted to chime in just from a point as well. So I'm also an editor at what's called Solar Punk Magazine, and we actually feature optimistic speculative fiction alternatives in terms of the environment and in terms of social change. And so when people say that they don't see color, the way I've always thought of that is that they don't want to see their impact of privilege upon that group of color. So it's their way of ignoring the problems. It's their way of ignoring the systems that they've put in place that hold those groups of color down. So at this magazine, we've had so many awesome stories come in from like Africa, from around the world. And the one thing I always encourage our authors to do is to write and to get your stories out there, because your story needs to be told. Like when I was growing up, as you guys said, like it was hard to find Black authors. And when I did find them, it's because I stumbled across them. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it should be. It should be where someone can go out and they can find us anywhere, everywhere, every genre. And so it's just very important that people don't self-sabotage themselves. Don't allow that doubt to not allow you to get your story out. It's very important because these narratives need to be told. There's so many times that I've read books and I'm like, I like this story, but there's another way that this could have been told. I like this story, but it would have been great to see an author of color telling this. Because the other problem that we run into is that people write people of colors in their novels, but they don't do it in a respectful way. They don't take the time to research the culture. They don't take time to have a beta reader that's of that culture to get perspective. So it just comes out all across disrespectful. So that's another thing as a reader that's just been like so frustrating for me, is when they write main characters of color, but they're not in a way that's respectful and honorable.
Absolutely. Simone?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention really quick, I had a ghostwriting experience where this gentleman wanted me to write a very graphic, we'll say hood novel. And in the book, with the outline he provided, he wanted some very degrading things to happen to the main character, who was a Black female. So I immediately was like, okay, well, are you Black? Like, what's going on here? Some person from the UK. And I was like, well, no, I'm not going to write it. Offered me more money, not going to write it. So declined the offer. A couple months later, he chimes in because he was knowledgeable of my writing style. And he basically gave me a completely new format and was like, okay, well, can you write it like this? And I ended up writing it, but in a way to where like this character is not going to get degraded. This is not going to be the story and how I'm going to represent. And so it's like having that personal integrity as an author myself and allowing that to carry over to whatever audience I decide to represent. And I think that's a vital thing, like as we continue to put out books, just making sure that how we want to represent our work, stand confident in it, the right audience will find it. But for somebody to come and tell me this is what you're going to write based on contract, no, I'm absolutely not. And then turning it around and then him having to circle back and say, well, okay, we'll do it this way, which was the way I told him to do it in the first place. So it's just, making sure that we stand on our moral compass for the work that we're going to put out. That's, all I want to say.
Absolutely. I know, Winnie, you have your hand up. I want to definitely say that this goes back to the importance of, well, first of all, there are a lot of people who are looking for people like yourself, Simone, who can write using a Black voice. A lot of companies, a lot of writers are tapping into, as I get contacted by companies who say, I want to connect with people on the Black Writers Workspace because I'm looking for people who can write with a Black voice. And I'm like you, I will drill them for hours if I have to make sure that whatever you are going to expose to this group, it is not to exploit anyone, it is not to degrade us. So we have to be our own gatekeepers of our own narrative as well, and saying no, because it's too much of that out there. So congratulations to you, Simone, for being strong enough to say no, this is not going to happen. That's great. Winifred?
Yeah, kind of to give my own like story about, again, it was I was in a Facebook group. I left the group now because it was a mess, but I was in a Facebook group for other authors, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it was a white author. They were going to publish a book that was about Native Americans and their tribe, and it was very supposed to be very enticing about their tribe, their stories, their culture, etc. And they pulled out from writing or publishing the book because people were like, well, what do you know about the tribe, about the culture, about these Native American people? And the Facebook comments were like, it was a lot of white people going, oh, well, I mean, you can't stop them. Like, they have a right to write about any person of color. Like, they have, and in theory, yes, you do have the right to write about anybody, but you have to know that if you're not writing about your own story, about your own life, about your own experiences, you have to talk to people. You have to go out and reach. You can't, I'm not going to go here and start writing about people from Guatemala just because, I've seen some pictures and I've tried some food at a restaurant. Like, that's not, like, no, that's not enough to make a whole story. Like, I have to talk to people who are Guatemalan. I have to know their culture. I have to invest in it. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And in turns, you get a lot of these books that you can tell it wasn't written by someone of that culture. You can tell that it wasn't written by someone
Absolutely.
who's immersed themselves in nation. And when you get a bad representation, especially if it's a white author writing it, that might be the only representation that culture, that tribe, those people may have in the real world. And it sucks for them because I know they have other writers and authors, but they're not given that platform. And
Mhm.
on the flip side, sometimes I've had people come to me and ask me, like, hey, I want to write about a Black person. How do I go about this? And that's a great way to start, is by asking people who are in that community, is by asking them, because if you want to write someone who's authentic and from a different culture or from a different race or even a different gender, you have to talk to people who've lived those experiences, because that's the only way, the closest way you're going to get to something authentic. Because be honest, you're not Black, you're not a woman, you're not, so it's really hard to explain that to some people who do go, oh, but I don't see color, I don't see race. Well, sweetheart, the world does. We live in a world that like, this is not a colorblind society, so
No.
you're going to have to see it one way or another. So to also bring another point in, that as a fantasy author, a lot of the times it's hard to, how do I put this? When you're writing fantasy, you're kind of making up everything. Sometimes people write fantasy where it's based on Earth and it's based But for me, I write fantasy. Everything I made up, it all comes from my noggin, and it all has inspirations from my culture and my background. And sometimes you'll have people who'll be like, well, I mean, since it's not, based in the human world, based on Earth, these can't be black people. Sweetheart, they're black. Like it's like I give descriptions. It's just because they're not experiencing racism, just because they're not experiencing systematic racism, or they're not experiencing prejudice because they're black, doesn't make them not black. I'm still writing characters of color. I'm still writing characters of different disabilities and mental health issues. It's just that I'm not putting that as the focal point. Like they're a black person and then this is what happens. It's not, oh, because they're black, this is what happens. Because they're black, oh, let me remind you again, they're black, so they're suffering. Because it's like, no, no, no. Like, yes, they're a black person, and then they have magical powers and can fly on dragons. Like this, like being black isn't the biggest thing about this book.
It's so funny. It's so funny you said that. I had someone to contact me who had who read one of my books. I think she's a teacher, a white reviewer, and she asked me, and she sent me a side email, and I was really happy that she did because I like opening up dialogue to answer questions with people. She asked me the question of why did I define all of my black characters as being black in my book? And I want to talk about that a little bit before we get into what readers want. Because when she asked the question, I didn't even realize I was doing that. But I do it, and probably most of us do. We describe our black characters. You just don't say, Tyrone or Timothy walks into the room, blah blah blah. If it's his first, because I write fiction, so if it's first introduction into the book, I'm going to define him. But now I'm also going to do all my characters that way. But she just kept asking me. She said, "Help me to understand, why did you feel you had to describe all of your black characters?" And I was like, because we're not the mainstream. If I read a book and I don't know who wrote it, I don't know if they're the color, race, or whatever, I automatically assume they're white. Think about that. I don't know if you guys do, but if you read a book and you don't know who wrote it and you don't really understand, like if it just opens up, I automatically think it's white because that's the norm for me. That's the norm. Now, as a writer, though, I want to make sure people know that my characters are black. So anybody, and we can talk, some people use their chocolate, cocoa skin, whatever it is that you use, but do you find that to be an issue? And I didn't have an issue with her asking the question, but I did have to say to myself, why do I do that? Why do I need to do that? If someone sees that I'm African American, shouldn't they assume the character is black, or does that make sense? Joyce, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, Lord, yes. Okay. Toni Morrison has a YouTube video, and I'm not sure if this is the one when she had a person of color to ask her that. Go see it, because that right there, she was like, and basically she was saying, why wouldn't I? Everyone writes from their experiences. Why wouldn't I write about black people? And then she went further. I forgot who she said. It was a famous sci-fi writer or something. Would you ask him that? And it's like, it's again, that question right there really like presses my buttons. You know what I'm saying? Because why wouldn't I? And why wouldn't I write about all the little things that I am? Like you were saying, I'm Indian. Just because that box, we gotta stop. When we write, just write. Because there are so many boxes they try to label you in and put you in. But if you've seen all the famous writers of color or mildly melanated, they didn't go by the box. They went out the box. And then they succeeded because of that. And we have to remind ourselves that that's somebody else's opinion, which is not my business. Unless it affects my money. But you feel what I mean?
Love that. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Ariana?
I It definitely is an interesting question. So with my own writing, for instance, there's times when I start off introducing the character by description as black, but it also depends on what my plot is. So for instance, I actually have an educational thriller out, and I actually describe her in terms of like her hair color, her eye color, and things like that. But I don't describe her skin color because what she's actually doing to me is more important than them seeing what she looks like for the first time. So I guess it just depends on the plot, but it is in a way kind of sad that we feel we have to describe our characters as black because we're so used to not seeing black characters. People should automatically assume because we're black authors that a majority of our characters will be black. It should just be a natural assumption. But unfortunately, in publishing, that's just not the case.
And that's how I felt too. Now, I will say this, my first book, my main character was a white man. I wrote a book based on an experience I was having at my job, and it turned into a novel. And I believe that I did my homework and my research, and he dealt with a lot of different things. But I got a lot of pushback on that because I had people say, why couldn't he be black? And, he was not a great character. I mean, he wasn't a great guy. I'm not sitting here. I didn't quite always understand the comments about him because it just felt like people felt that, not a lot of people, there were a few readers who felt like this was a character that very well could have been a black man. And because I made him white, he was very wealthy, but he dealt with a lot of things. And he fell in love with a black girl and all that. And it really wasn't about race. It wasn't about that. It was just my first novel. It was the story that came to me. And as a creator, I wanted to go with that. But I was very interested after I put the book out to have some of the comments because I did describe him as blue eyes, and I didn't say he was a white guy, but I did describe him that way. And then I would have people in the middle of the book will call me and say, "Is this character white?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he look at his. I mean, yes, he is." And so, I am a believer that you should be able to write the character that you want to write, but you have to do your research. You cannot do things and be stereotypical because we're all going to build characters that look different. I mean, that's not gonna that's not odd. So I love that you do. I do. I'm very descriptive in my writing, so I describe every character. And when she asked the question, it was very focused on the black characters, but she didn't focus on the white characters that I also described as being, white. So, but I'm with you. It's because also we don't see ourselves enough, and I want to make sure people know that this is a black character. So good, good, good. We are it's 10:33. We've got a little less than 30 minutes to go. More comments coming in. I'm going to put them up on the screen. We may not address them all. But I will say this. Let's talk a little bit about. Well, there someone else who wanted to chime in on that question.
I was going to add on that same thing. I do not always put what the color is until I want to make the point. Like, oh yeah, this is a black woman, and this is, so I weave it in when I want to do that. And other times I just want people to listen to my characters, just see who they are. And then I sprinkle it. And then also too, I'm trying very hard to use as many descriptive words as I can to describe our skin color, who we are, and I really challenge myself in that department because it's easy for us to say this, this, and this. And the last thing is also I start looking at the stereotypes, like size, what the depth of our skin colors and what that type of person does and doesn't do. So I'm taking on the responsibility quite a bit to make sure that I'm not putting stereotypes into my own work.
Right. Love it. Absolutely. Let's talk about what the reader wants. This has been such a great conversation about diversity. We wanted to make sure that what we really want to do is to break down the box, break it up, tear it down, burn it in the fireplace. We're done with the fact that as writers, we have to write with all these limitations and stereotypes hanging over our heads. Because if you want to get to a very authentic place in your work, then you need to be able to tell your story and to tell it with all full transparency if you need to. And it's your story. It's your story, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi, horror, fiction, nonfiction, self-help, whatever it is that you're doing, it is your story to tell. And so we wanted to really deal with some of the diversity challenges that we're facing. But I also wanted to, with this particular topic, because I started out when I put out the request for panelists, the topic was what readers want. What are they looking for? And my goal was to get some readers on here to talk about what exactly they're looking for when they're looking for a good book. So we're going to kind of change the topic a bit. And because we're mostly writers, I want to talk a little bit about what you're hearing from your readers to what they want. And because we have editors, ghostwriters, and all these amazing people on here, talk to us a little bit about what it is that readers are looking for in a great book, not a good book, but a great book. Winnie, you want to start?
Yes. So for me, what surprised me is that readers don't mind cliches as long as you are unique with it. So I was worried because my books have like the chosen one, cliche where it technically is the chosen four, but the chosen one and a slow burn romance. And I was nervous that people would be like, oh, this is too cliched, or oh, I've read this 1,000 times. And for some people, that's what they like. They like to read those types of stories. It's just that they want it unique to that book, or they want it unique to that reader, or excuse me, writer. So it was really learning that, readers love to read cliches because that's a genre or something they love to read and immerse themselves in. It's just that the problem is when it's just too cookie cutter and there's no uniqueness or twist to it or spin that really turns off a reader. They don't mind the cliches. They don't mind if you're having a stereotype that's been played 1,000 times, as long as you are not being so cookie cutter to it. You're not playing it by everybody's story. You're still having its own uniqueness, and the rest of the book is still original to you and your idea and story. Readers will read it, and readers will love it.
The difference between what a reader wants and what a movie viewer wants to see in a story. Anybody ever think about that? Because I get very frustrated with the fact that a lot of our movies are just remakes. And all these great books out here. I mean, everybody on this screen, I bet you have a book or a story that you've written that could be an excellent movie. But yet Hollywood will not pay attention to these stories. We want, 7 versions of Spider-Man. There's only so many things Spider-Man can do. I don't care who plays him. I mean, it's just a little, it's so odd to me between those two dynamics can be very different. Storytelling, like you said, I think there are some of us who read and we need a comfortable story. We don't want it to be too outside the norm for us. And it's like that with movies. Some of us, want a movie that's, that kind of fits it's not cookie cutter, but at least it's something I'm comfortable with. Anybody else? Sean, you had a question? You had a comment? And Simone after that.
Yeah, since we're all Marvel fans here, when I watch a lot of movies, I actually own about 1,200 DVDs. So I'm like you, Michelle. I say Marvel, when I'm watching a movie, I always want to see kind of a reflection or a representation of myself. And like right now, I'm saying that Marvel has a black male problem because most of their black male characters, since, Chadwick Boseman died, have no powers, have no ability. They're all human. They're all on the lower power scale. So when I look for things like that, I kind of look for representation of myself. When I'm writing, I found that since I'm kind of a history buff too, I weave historical facts into my fiction writing. And the readers that have read my novel are telling me that it made the story a little bit more meaty, and they enjoyed it a lot more because it had these facts that they could relate to, and it had a spin on it. And I know a lot of people are doing that a little bit more these days, but I'm finding that readers are really enjoying that blending of fact and fiction.
I love that too. I love that. Simone?
I was just going to say, as a beta reader, I always tell the authors, like, I want to be able to use my 5 senses when I read a book, because I think it's just a reflection of how I write. So world building is very big to me. one author that stands out is Bernice McFadden. When I read her work, like I'm so engrossed in what she's written because I feel like I'm in the room with the character. I can smell the perfume. I can see the certain things going on, and it makes it very animated as I read. So I feel like even though I'm, watching this book, hallucinating on the words, my mind has created this movie based on what she said. And so I really appreciate that aspect when I read a book.
Oh, I love that. You want to take the reader on a journey, and you want to force them to use their imagination. It's nothing like reading a book and you just see yourself in the scene. Like that's a good writer because they have, you can't describe every piece, everything in a room, but there are certain things a good writer is going to pick up to know. If I tell them that, the room smelled of popcorn, that's going to make them, you know what I'm saying? Like there are just certain things that a good writer is going to know to pick up on. And so that's excellent. Anybody else want to talk about Pepper?
Hey, Brianna, you want to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed
you. No, I was going to say, you can sense that I come from an acting background. So my acting technique, I bring to my writing. So number one, I would 100%, if you guys have time, take an improv class, take an acting class, because what Simone just said is that's 100% how I bring senses in. I bring sense, touch, all those things into my writing because I learned how to do it as an actor, and I teach workshops about it too. But that, I think, making it full that way is so gorgeous, and it's a great tool for us if you haven't tried it yourself, or whoever's listening.
Excellent. Love that. Take an acting class. I love that. I want to see your one-woman show. If you've got it on tape, please send it to all of us. I want to see that. You want to go, Ariana?
I'll piggyback off of what Pepper said. I also advise taking a screenwriting class. I actually bought some books recently on screenwriting because one of my goals is to actually write a play based off of the first Black lady on Broadway. I actually researched, and they have like articles on her and things like that, but no one's ever like done a film on her, done a story on her, or anything. So I was like, it's important for people to know about these Black people across the spectrum. It's important for people to see that we have made a positive difference, that we have contributed to different art. And then I agree with the sensory thing because I've read books before, and if there's not any of that sensory detail, I put them aside. I always like table them. I'm gonna come back to them later. But what I've noticed is now that I'm older, I also like to see a lot of stories with tons of culture in them. So like for the magazine, for instance, I'm always advertising the writers. Like, hey, if you're of Asian descent or you're African descent, South American descent, I want to see your stories. I want to know about your culture. I want to see through your lens. I want to know about you. And I think it's more important that, authors of color do get out there more. It's important that we know their stories and their reflections and their ideas. So that's what I've been drifting towards too.
I'm sorry, who was the first lady of Broadway? The first Black lady of Broadway. What is her name?
I will have to message you that later. I can't remember offhand. I'm sorry. But yeah, I've started to like research to begin writing a screenplay on that. Excellent. So we'll see.
I hope everyone who's listening understands that when we start writing books, you just don't do one thing. Like the creative juices began to flow. You're looking at writing film and plays and blogging, and there are just so many doors open once you learn how to tap into that writing creativity. It just goes so far. So you have to just go with it. I mean, there are so many ideas I just wrote a comic book teaching young people how to start businesses because I have a youth entrepreneurship program, and it's called Poppy Makes Cajun Popcorn Magic. And it's the 10 steps to how to build a successful business, because that's a lot of what I do on the side. And so I wanted to do something fun, and she deals with imposter syndrome, and she's doing all these different things, but she's a young 18-year-old girl who wants to be an entrepreneur. And so it's just, you have to, it takes you on a journey once you start putting pen to paper. And that's why we definitely encourage everyone to continue to write. So who else wants to talk about what they know that readers want? I'm a big love bug. I think there has to be an element of love in every story. I don't necessarily think it has to be romantic love, but just the love of something, what you do, who you are. And like you said, Oshan, I infuse my faith into my work. I don't, my first book, I call it, it's Christian fiction, but the character never steps foot in a church. I like to weave the impact of faith in God into stories without it being so strong that it makes you feel a little bit intimidated by it. So, I do that often with some of the work that I put out there, but that's because I spent 5 years writing for a Christian magazine, and so that's a lot of what I did. But I do. A good story is just going to grab you. Now, I've read some amazing stories from the Black Writers Workspace, stories that needed a lot of editing, true enough, but you're talking about dynamic stories that should be movies. Absolutely. We are writing some good stuff. We've got some stories to tell. It's just getting the techniques under, in controlled is where it needs to go. Ariana, you had another question or another comment?
One thing I wanted to add to that, because it's very important, what you're saying is about getting our stories out there. As I had mentioned in the last panel, we also need to get into the movie industry. We also need to, as Ashan mentioned, get into the marketing industry, because this is unfortunately one of the few ways and possibly the only way we're going to get these stories out. The reason why we're not seeing the movies is because the people that are on the deciding part of what movies are out there are not us. And the ones of those that are us are not in positions that are high enough to dictate what is shown, what is processed, what is not censored. So it's just a matter of people taking the initiative and building up these things in our community.
100% agree. And the idea to get there is what we're doing here, is to talk about breaking down these walls and getting those gatekeepers, if need be, whether it's in Hollywood or in these traditional publishing houses, to respect and honor the Black story, to know that the Black story is the American story, and it is dynamic. And if you deny us the opportunity to tell our stories, no matter where the story takes you, whether it's a story that's in the hood or if it's a story that's in, a castle, if you don't allow those stories to come to the big screen, or to make it outside of just our imaginations, that the world is going to lose that. We have to tell these stories. I love movies, like I said, and I've gotten into watching so many movies, and I'm so fascinated with the characters that I'm seeing in these movies now. Asian girls dating Black guys in a romance. That's something I didn't see 10 years ago. Um, my theory is that after George Floyd's murder, a lot of the powers that be began to think about the fact that we are too we're not getting our attention on who we are as a race, as a group of people. If anybody saw the hearing against the police officer, the call, what they were doing in that hearing was too much of trying to prove that George Floyd was a man. You understand what I'm saying? We have to get beyond that. Black people, we shouldn't have to prove that at this point. And so I see that even in the way our work is being handled. So we're going to wrap up this last 10 minutes with everybody giving some advice to our writers and our readers. Just the final word to keep the writers motivated, and to let the readers know how to get a hold of your information. Also, be sure to put your info in the comment area. I want to start by just thanking everybody for being a part of the roundtable. 2 hours is a long time to be on here, but as you can tell, it's a lot of good information. I am looking forward to reviewing all of this, and to continuously keeping up with everybody here on the screen. I'm Michelle Jackson, founder of the Black Writers Workspace and director of author.com. I am 3 times published. I have 3 books. The Heart of a Man is my first book in 2010. My second book was From Darkness to Night in 2020. And Poppy Makes Cajun Popcorn Magic was released this year in April. So thank you. I just want to say to all our writers, keep writing, keep doing it. And we're going to pass the mic and let everyone give their final response, so that we can keep our writers and readers motivated. Winnie?
Okay. Well, it was so great meeting you all and talking to everyone. To find me, I'm on Wins Books LLC. So I also help and promote new authors, new writers, doing spotlights, doing workshops. making ebooks, memberships, etc. So I do love this community. I do love to help and support my fellow indie authors. I've written now, like I said earlier, 4 books in a 6-book, hopefully it's just 6-book series. And I have many more books to come, more than I know. I'll probably be writing for the next 20 plus years, but excited for that. And again, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter at Wins Books. And I love to meet everybody. It was so great meeting you guys. And as advice to new authors or writers, don't be afraid to ask for help. And don't be afraid that no one's going to read your story, because your story is unique to you and you will always have a writer for it. Or, you'll always have a reader for it. Also, good editors too. So,
love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Joyce?
2 things. Just like Nike, do it. If you have an idea, write it down. A lot of people, I think we touched on this like last time, is that, try to figure out, when am I a writer? And it's like, when you get that idea and when you put it down, that's when you become a writer. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joyce. You've always been so helpful. Continue to be a part of the Black Writers Workspace and the Pen Posse. Thank you so much. Pepper?
I get also very excited. I followed all of you. I found most of you on social. I'm at Pepper the Hot One on Twitter and Instagram. Again, my book is Harlem's Awakening. You can find my blog, penandpepper.com, where I write about stories of heroes, including my own. And my other brand I'd love you to check out is called Brown Betties, and the Brown Betties are featured in my Harlem's Awakening. That's women's empowerment. So, and advice for writers, kind of like what Joyce just said, just write. We find so many people are like, oh my God, you wrote a book, how'd you do it? Well, you know what? I put a sentence on a piece of paper, and that's really all it is. Don't judge yourself. Don't feel it has to be perfect. Don't worry about all the other things until you have a finished book. And you can only have a finished book if you start with 1 sentence or 1 word. So,
excellent. Love
thank
that.
you, Michelle.
Pepper the Hot One. Okay, love that. Okay, Brianna.
Thank you guys again for having me on this panel. I'm very honored to be among some really talented people. You can find me actually on Twitter the most at Atola Writes. I also publish stuff about like the magazine on there. I publish with the magazine. I also publish on Kindle Vella under 2 names, actually, AF Toller and Frances Black. Frances Black is actually my pseudonym for like my more spicy stuff, because I am a teacher, so can't have my real name on stuff like that, so that my students can find my material. And for those of you that are needing an editor for your manuscripts, I do edit manuscripts at a low cost. So if you ever want to get a quote from me, tollermediagroup@outlook.com is my email to reach me. And one piece of advice is always carry a notebook with you, which is something I do, because when you have those ideas, you can quickly jot them down so you don't forget them. And keep writing. Please keep writing, because we need more of your stories.
Excellent. We have an editor here on the Black Writers Workspace. We are always advocating for everyone to get a good editor. Do not do it yourself. You're too close to the work. Get a good editor. So thank you so much for sharing that information. We hope that you get some calls behind this, no doubt. Simone?
You can find me across the board, author SD Johnson. That's the pen name I use, authorsdjohnson.com, where you'll find like all the author services, my books, blogs, all that good stuff. And then on social media, like I said, across the board, author SD Johnson. It was a pleasure meeting everybody. Like Pepper, I'm going to follow everybody and support. Definitely a big supporter. Michelle, thank you so much for just accepting and allowing me to be on the panel. Had a blast this morning. And I guess the bit of advice that I would say is write for you first. You have to fall in love with your work first, and someone else will, guaranteed. So write for you first, and then the right readers will gravitate towards it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part of this event, Simone. I've just really enjoyed everything that you've shared with us, and continue to do great things. Really appreciate you guys being here. And Ashan, Ashan, you have been our only guy and you have added so much value to everything. I met you a couple of weeks ago here in Louisiana at a book fair, and you were saying,
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to go prime time. I'm like, no, 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 come on. And you have been excellent because that Sharknado, I'm going to put that on my wall. Because you need those things to remind you that everything isn't perfect. And you
Yes.
hit it. So thank you. Talk to us give us some words of wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me, Michelle. It's been great meeting everybody. I really enjoyed this. You kind of pushed me to get out of my shell a little bit with this. So as soon as I saw you post it, I said, I don't even want to think about it. Let me just sign up for it and get it done. So thank you again. I really enjoyed it. And you can find me through all social media, Twitter, Instagram. It's Life Through Fiction, THRU. Also at Dreadful Time Press. I have Instagram, Facebook. That's my publishing company. So you can also find links to purchase Descent of the Broken Man. I encourage you to take a look at it, read it. It has multiple stories that kind of weave and come together at the end. I think it's very, very enjoyable. Advice to authors out there is time management. A lot of us have families. I do a lot of writing on my phone using notes. If you have Apple devices, notes pair with your laptop. So once you do it, it'll pair and you can copy and paste into your manuscript from there. You can do a lot on the go. And I can emphasize the importance of editing. And so make sure you get proper editing. Pay for the professionals, like Michelle said. Call Abriana if you need to and book somebody. And watch out for imposter syndrome. And like I said, if you start to get that, Sharknado.
That's
Sharknado.
it.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. This has been excellent. Thank you all for being a part of this episode of the Pen Posse Roundtable. For those of you who are watching, if you have any topics that you think we should tackle in the coming months, please, you can send those over to me at events@PR Solutions, and I'm going to put it in the comments. And you can send me some ideas on what you think we should talk about. We're going to be doing these every month. There are also so many other things that the Black Writers Workspace is working on, so I want to take a little time to do that. First, we will be having a writer's sprint this Thursday. It is free. If you're interested, you can actually register on Eventbrite. If you go to our Linktree Black Writers Workspace, you can find links to all of these things. Or if you go to any of our pages, you should be able to find it. It's a writer's sprint, 1 hour of writing, then an opportunity to kind of talk about your work. So please join us for that. This Monday is the deadline for the Black Creators Collaborative Writing Competition. If you are interested, you can also find that information on our Linktree or on our pages. It is free to apply. $500 top prize, $250 second, $150 the third prize. This is great because it's sponsored by the Obsidian Group or the Obsidian Collection. This is a group out of the Chicago area. They have created what we're calling the Black Writers LinkedIn. And so you can go in there and build a platform and they can connect you with top brands that are looking for voices of color. The deadline is Friday, though. So we do need a sample of your work. It can be any sample in order to compete. I want to also say that we announced our winners of the Chapter 1 writing competition the other day. We had 3 writers who won top prizes in fiction, nonfiction, and poetry categories. We announced that live on Thursday night, and so you can find that link out there. I just want to tell everybody who won, congratulations. It was an amazing competition. We had over 60 writers to compete. And so that's a big deal. And then we're going to host our first live book fair here in New Orleans in January of 2023. It's going to be January 28th. And so if you are interested in getting a booth, please, please, please go to Linktree, or you can find us on Eventbrite. You can register. It's free to attend as a guest, but our booths are $125. If you haven't been to New Orleans, you're going to love it. So please be a part of that event as well. So a lot going on with the Black Writers Workspace. We're not going to stop. I started this thing with 15 people, and now we have over 12,000 that's on the Facebook page. So for those of you who are not on Facebook, please join us there. But we are also on all of the social media sites with the exception of LinkedIn. I even tried to do a little TikToking. I don't know how that's working. My 15-year-old is not happy that I just said the word TikToking. So I'm just telling you, we are going to continue to do more. This is about us for us. Okay, so let's continue to support it. Again, thank you all for everything, for giving me your Saturday. I hope to see you again on screen. This will be available on YouTube and on Facebook. Everybody have a great Saturday. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Michelle, can you email some of that stuff to us? I found Obsidian and then something else that you mentioned. Do you have the time, or when you have time, could you email it to our group?
I will. I'll definitely do that.
Okay.
I'll email it out
Okay.
to you as soon as I get off the call. I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you. I found you on Twitter. Thank you for this. It was great.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.